Welcome to our Week 4 video, Advanced GeoGebra Techniques. The first topic this week has to do with text boxes. Now, we did talk about text boxes in Week 2. We talked about how to create them, how to add values that had been calculated by GeoGebra. I want to go into just a little bit more depth on those text boxes this week. This is 2.2.1, 2.2.2. We have a triangle, we have the three medians, we have that centroid point, and they're asked to find the ratio. So I've already actually completed this to make sure everything is correct, but I will take you through exactly how to do this. So obviously I am assuming you know how to create the triangle, the three medians, that point of intersection G. But what we want to talk about is making sure we understand how did I find AG, GD, the ratio, how did I include that text box? Because it's a little bit more involved than it was 2 weeks ago. Of course, we know I can come up here to this button to calculate distance or length. I'm not going to do that, but that's how I found AG and GD. And once I did that, it actually calculated AG and GD for me, but it had the word distance in front of it. The part to the left of the equal sign is just the label. So what I did was I actually just got rid of that word distance. So let me get rid of this for just a second so you can see what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to come up here to distance or length and click GD. And of course that created that distance GD. So what I was saying is that because I'm too lazy to write the whole word distance GD, I'm just going to get rid of that distance word in front so that GD is in fact the distance from G to D. Now why did I do that? Because down here when I'm calculating that ratio, they asked me to calculate the ratio of AG GD. I'm going to call it ratio. So you can call it whatever you want to call it. So I just typed in the word ratio. I know you can't see it. And then I'm going to put, instead of distance AG, I'm going to put AG and divided GD. So all I did was I entered that with my keyboard. I know it was difficult to see because it was shoved down here in the corner. I apologize for that. But this is what I typed in and it spit out 2 because if I took AG divided by GD, I would get 2. Now, if I want to have a text box that shows what the ratio is and what is going to happen, that's what we learned a little bit of last week. So I'm going to come up here to text and I want it to appear here. So last week we said we can see the ratio is 2 or will always be 2. And then if I clicked on advanced, I could click on preview and it would look exactly how it would look if I clicked OK. But what I want is now I want to actually include the ratio and some of those other symbols. So here, if I click on latex formula, now if I go down to preview, this looks crazy because I'm now in latex. So in latex, to show a space between two words, I've got to use that /:, and I would have to do that between every single word. So what I would suggest to you is to either create 2 text boxes, one that has your words and one that has your math, or just get ready to do, the /:. At the end, I'm going to put 2 slashes because what that's going to do is going to give me going to the next line. So now if I come down here under preview, we can see the ratio is 2. Now what I want is now to use the latex formula. So under advanced, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how to choose values. But what I want is I want to show what I'm actually doing. So I want to use A divided by B. Now what does that tell me? That tells me I'm using the structure of a fraction. So if I scroll back up, notice all it does is it inputs that coding that I would need in latex in order for it to be a fraction. So if you are a coder, if you know how to do that, you don't have to use those buttons. You can just enter it. I am not a coder. So I'm going to put, instead of A, I'm replacing it with AG. So that's just the letters AG, not the distance. And then instead of B, the letters GD. So I want it to actually show, again, down to preview. It says we can see the ratio is 2. I have AG over GD. Well, now I want to actually show the values. So I can either go down to LaTeX and click that fraction again, or I can see what that coding is that I have to include. So it's frac, and then the brackets, I'm going to put, instead of AG, I now want the distance from A to G, which I have to choose from GeoGebra. So AG, and then close the brackets, and then open the brackets, and I want the measure of GD, and then I want to close the brackets, and then I want equals, and I want the actual ratio. So the ratio, remember we called it ratio, so I'm going to choose ratio. Now I'm going to go to preview, and this is what I want to see. So now if I click out of all of that, I've got my text box here, I've got AG over GD, I've got the two values, and I have the computed ratio. And then if I drag, I can see that this does in fact pass the drag test because the ratio is always going to be 2. So again, that's just a little bit more insight into how to use LaTeX. Going back here, we already talked about how to find values, to create those values over here and then find them in the GeoGebra tab. But the LaTeX formula will give you those structures that you might need and make things essentially look prettier. The last thing is, if I needed to use any of those Greek letters, I can choose that third tab over. So if I was, say, finding the measure of some angle or the area of a triangle, I would use, area and then parenthesis and then triangle ABC equals 180, make a new line, click OK. Now obviously that doesn't make any sense in this case because I'm not dealing with the area, but you get the idea that that's how I could use those special symbols. Let's move on now to section 3.2. This asks us to create a sketch. And whenever we're creating a sketch, think about what you would do for your own students. How would you want your students to be able to learn something that you're trying to teach them? So you would create an interactive sketch where they are given information, enough information to be successful that they could go through at their own pace. So I've created a very basic sketch here, and I'll take you through exactly how I did it, but I want to show you how a sketch works before we recreate it together. So if I'm creating a sketch, these checkboxes will show just certain items. So here, construct triangle ABC. Here, construct perpendicular bisectors. Here, construct orthocenter. That is what we're asked to do. Construct triangle, perpendicular bisectors, orthocenter. Now that we know how this works, let's get rid of these checkboxes and talk about how to create them ourselves. So I'm going to just delete the checkboxes that I have, and I'm going to come right over here to the slider tool, and I'm going to choose checkbox and choose where I would like it to go. And I want the caption is whatever is going to be shown next to the checkbox, to be construct triangle ABC. Down here is where I'm going to select the objects. So I want point A to show up. I want point B to be part of the triangle, point C to be part of the triangle. I want the segments that actually create the triangle. And I want the triangle polygon ABC. So if I click OK, it says construct triangle ABC, and I can see that that's exactly what's happening when I click triangle ABC. Now I'm going to choose another checkbox. I'm going to put it over here. It's going to be called construct perpendicular bisectors. And I want just the 3 perpendicular bisectors, and that's all. So again, uncheck, check, that's the 3 perpendicular bisectors. Now I'm going to construct that last checkbox, call it construct orthocenter. And all I want is point H. And OK. Now, as I can see, if I click on any of those boxes, that's exactly what happens. Before we move on, I do want to show you just one more thing regarding checkboxes. So as you can see, I have the same basic information. I have the same checkboxes. I've added a little bit of text here, and obviously I just went up here to text and wrote some instructions. So this again is something you could do for your students to give them a little bit of more information than just construct a triangle. So here's how you construct the triangle, and let them try that. And then they can click on construct triangle. Now notice what I've done is when I checked construct triangle, then I assume that the student has already done that or understands how to do that. And now I have some additional instructions. So again, if you were, say, going to define something or give additional information, this is a great way to do it. So I have that again for construct perpendicular bisectors as well. I didn't put anything after construct orthocenter, but obviously could have said great job or now try it on your own. Before we end this little part of the tutorial, I want to show you how I did that. So the first thing is, obviously, you know how to create the text boxes. What we maybe don't know how to do is right click on a checkbox and go to fix checkbox. So I can move those around where I want them in case they weren't quite where I wanted them, but then I'm going to fix it back so that it doesn't move. Now the advantage here is now if I'm moving my triangle and moving my page around, that's not going to move. I've done the same here. I went to lock object and pin on screen. So let me show you what happens if I don't lock it, then students can move it around. And again, notice it's staying there, but if that's because it's pinned. If I didn't pin it to screen and now I adjusted, see how it's moving all over the place. So you want to make sure that you lock object, pin to screen. I'm going to do both of those. Now, the last part is just using those values of D, E, and I. So those are the number or letters, excuse me, that you need to know in order to make these appear or disappear. So like this one, I could have had it disappear, but you don't have to get too crazy about it. So this one, if I just go to right click and go to settings, and what I want is after D, this is D. Once D is true, I want this to show up. So I've got to go to settings and go to advanced. Notice I just typed in D equals true. And once I did that, then when I can uncheck the box, that's when it goes away. And then I did the same. The other truth value was E. So E was construct perpendicular bisectors. So if I went to, let's go ahead and get them on there so I can see them. Here, if I go to settings, of course, I'm not going to be able to see settings. We'll try again. Settings. And then I went to advanced and I put E equals true. So once this is checked, this is going to appear. So that's all you have to do to add in those other things, is to make sure you have them locked and pinned, just like you have these fixed, fix the checkbox and so forth. And that way, when you're doing all of your stuff over here, when you're moving it around, everything stays right where it's supposed to and nothing gets too crazy. Now you can get as detailed or over the top as you'd like, but remember, you're doing this for your students, so you want it to be clear and concise and to the point. The last thing we want to talk about is how to build your toolbox in GeoGebra. So tools are exactly what it sounds like. These are tools that we are going to build so that when we have a construction that is time consuming, we can save it as a tool and just use that tool to do all of the things that we need to have done without having to recreate them from scratch. So some of these are pretty straightforward. So let's start with a very easy one. 3.1.1 says you want a tool that accepts 2 points as input objects and whose output is an equilateral triangle. So I'm going to go to the polygon tool and I want a regular polygon because I want it to be equilateral. A, B, I've got 3 sides. There's my polygon. Now I don't care what it's called, so I'm going to show hide label. I don't need to see that. I just want to see the triangle. So there's my equilateral triangle ABC. So when you're creating a tool, you go ahead and create the construction first. Now I'm going to start by clicking on triangle ABC. This is just a little bit of a shortcut, so I'll show you both ways. So if I go ahead and click on that, I choose the 3-line menu. I go down to Tools and Create New Tool. Notice Output Objects already has polygon AB3. Input Objects already has point A and point B. So what this is telling me is if I'm using this tool and I make 2 points, it's going to give me just the polygon. But I also want that third point. I want point C. So I don't want it just be a polygon. I actually want point C to be an output as well. I'm going to call this equilateral because they asked me to call it that. And then make sure that this guy is checked, Show in Toolbar. And then I'm done, so I'm going to go to Finish. Now, I can use that eraser to get rid of everything on there. Now, I want you to notice that this little wrench showed up in my tools at the top. And the only thing I have up there is equilateral. And notice it says equilateral point point. So that says the 2 inputs are 2 points. So A, B, and it creates an equilateral triangle. D, E, it creates an equilateral triangle. So my tool is working exactly how I wanted it. I'm inputting 2 points. I'm getting the third point and the equilateral triangle back out. And now I'm going to delete all of that. Now, in order to save it so that I can continue to use it, I'm going to go up here to File, Save, and I'm going to save online. So I'm going to call this Tool Template. So here's my tool template, and the only tool I have is equilateral. Now, the next question says, I want 2 points as input objects and the output is a square. Name it square. Easy enough. So I'm going to come up here to regular polygon, 1, 2, 4 vertices. So I'm creating that polygon. I'm going to hide the label because I don't need it. And then again, I'm going to select the square. That will make it easier. So watch what happens if I don't select the square and I come up here to Tools, Create New Tool. It doesn't already have the output object pre-selected. So it just saves time if you select it first. So I want point C to come out. I want point D to come out. I want the polygon itself to come out. And obviously, you know, the sides. So the input object is point A and point B. And I'm going to call this square. And then Finish. So now if I delete, I should be able to choose the square tool. Oops, choose the square tool, make 2 points, and it should make the 2 other points and the square itself. 2 points, 2 other points, and the square itself. 2 points, 2 other points, the square itself. So you get the idea. I feel pretty good about my tool. So I'm going to File, Save. I'm going to still call it Tool Template. So the idea is we're just going to continue building tools in our tool template. The last tool I want to create is to create the altitudes of a triangle, which is a line, not a segment, but a line that goes through a vertex and the line opposite at a 90-degree angle. So again, I would create a polygon, ABC. I would create those perpendicular lines, so from A to the opposite sideline, from B to the opposite sideline, and from C to the opposite sideline. Now I don't have to create the orthocenter, that's actually for the next tool, so that one should be pretty easy once you finish this tool. I believe the instructions say make sure the altitudes have a distinctive color or that they stand out. And so we want, again, for those to stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and create the points opposite. And I'm going to then select this median, and I'm just going to make it pink or a different color. I can even make it dotted if that makes it easier. I'm going to take this one, do the same thing, make it pink and dotted. And this one, and make it dotted and pink. Oh, and dotted. And so now I have the 3 altitudes. Now what I want is again, for those altitudes to be the output. So going back to the question itself, it says, constructs the altitudes of a triangle. It should accept 3 vertices as the input and produce the triangle and the altitudes as output objects. And make sure the altitudes always appear in the same distinctive color. So again, down here, I've got exactly what I want in my construction. I now have to call it a tool. So I'm just going to select the triangle ABC. I'm going to go to Tools, Create New Tool. I want the triangle as an output. I also want the lines, which are the altitudes. And I want the segments of the triangle. Now I don't really need to put the segments because that's polygon ABC. But my input objects, I want A, B, and C. So it's going to accept A, B, and C. It's going to give me the triangle and the altitudes. And we're going to call this altitudes. And then finish. Again, I'm going to come down here to delete, get rid of everything. And then I'm going to use my altitudes to do A, B, C, and notice it does give me exactly what I wanted. Keep in mind, you can always go back and edit something if you need to edit it to change the inputs or the outputs. The last thing I want to talk about is how to use these tools. So obviously I've only created 3 tools so far, and this one is asking me to create 7 total tools. But then as I go to the next questions, it's going to say open your tools file so you have access to everything you've created. So every time I now have to do something else, I'm going to go over here to the 3 lines and say open and use my tool template. Now I think on that last question I didn't save the tool altitude, so I need to get rid of everything on the screen. And the reason I do that is if I don't get rid of it and then I save it with something on the screen, it's going to pop up the next time. I just want the tools. And as I can see, I've just lost altitude. So I did all of that work and I lost altitude. And the reason I lost it is because I didn't save it. So if I go to my tools, manage tools, I don't have any tools here. So don't freak out because I know that I have at least 2 tools. I'm going to go to File, Open, and choose my tools template. And look, I only have square and equilateral. So there's your warning right there to make sure once you create a tool to clear the screen and then save the tool. So learn from my mistakes. I would have to do that entire construction again. Whoops. I'm obviously not going to do that because we've already gone through it, but that's what you would do. Now, if I go to another question now and it says, open your tools file so you have access to all the tools you created, I'm going to then go to File, Open, and choose the tool template. So when I choose that, it's going to give me every single tool that I've created. Right now, that's only 2. I should have that 3rd one, but I forgot to save it. So I have all the tools. Then it says, make a new sketch that illustrates the Euler line theorem. First construct a triangle, and then use the tools from 3.1. So I'm going to be using not either of these, but I'm going to be using the 3 triangle centers. So I'll use that ortho center tool and that centroid tool that I will create in section 3.1. And so that's just going to make it a lot easier for you. And again, through every section from here on out, you will have access to those tools that you create.